Ambassador Hyunwoo walked through the long hallways of the Galactic Council building. His black shoes made soft sounds on the smooth floor. Around him, aliens of all shapes and sizes moved with purpose. Some looked like giant insects. Others were made of living crystal that caught the light. A few floated in special tanks filled with strange gas. After 70 years, humans had seen it all. They had learned to talk to species that spoke through colors, smells, or vibrations. They had made peace between enemies who had fought for thousands of years. They had solved problems that seemed impossible, but today felt different. Today, Hyunwoo was tired. He reached the main council chamber and took his seat at the human section. The room was huge, with seats arranged in circles that went up to the ceiling. Each section was built for different types of beings. Some needed water, others needed different air to breathe. Dr. So-young sat next to him. She was the best expert on alien cultures that humanity had. Her job was to help other humans understand why aliens acted the way they did. Next to her sat Captain Jae-sung, a military man who kept humans safe in space. Haijin, their translator, checked her equipment one more time. "Here we go again," So-young said quietly. She had seen this same fight many times before. The chamber filled with noise as more aliens arrived. The Vrex delegation came in first. They looked like huge ants but walked on two legs. Their leader clicked his mandibles in anger. Behind them came the Talar, who looked like walking diamonds. Light passed through their bodies and created rainbow patterns on the walls. "The 847th emergency session will now begin," announced the chamber's computer voice. It spoke in over 300 languages at the same time. "Today we discuss the Vrex-Talar border dispute." Hyunwoo had read the files. The Vrex said the Talar were mining in areas they should not touch. The Talar said the Vrex were building colonies where they had no right to be. Both sides were probably right. Both sides were probably wrong too. The Vrex leader stood up. His voice came out as clicks and buzzes, but the translation system made it sound like angry words. "The crystal beings take what is not theirs. They dig deep holes in our sacred breeding grounds." The Talar leader's response came as flashes of light from inside his body. The translator made it sound cold and logical. "The insect collective expands beyond all agreed limits. They ignore borders drawn by proper law." More aliens joined the argument. The Aquan, who looked like walking fish, worried about water rights. The healer cast from Miran, gentle beings who cared for the sick, begged everyone to think about the families caught in the middle. Hyunwoo watched it all. He had seen this exact same fight between different species dozens of times. The solution was always the same. Create shared zones, set up trade agreements that made both sides happy, build trust slowly over time. He stood up. The chamber grew quiet. Even after 70 years, when humans spoke, others listened. They might not like what humans said, but they knew human solutions usually worked. "Honored delegates," Hyunwoo began. His voice was calm and clear. "We have studied this problem carefully. The Vrex need safe places for their young to grow. The Talar need certain minerals that only exist in deep ground. These needs do not have to fight against each other." He activated a hologram that showed the disputed star system. 3 planets hung in the air, slowly spinning. "We propose shared mining rights on planets 2 and 3. The Vrex get full control of Planet 1 for breeding. The Talar get 90% of mining profits but must follow Vrex environmental rules. Both sides patrol the buffer zone together." It was a good plan. It was fair. It would work. Hyunwoo had made dozens of plans like this before. Some had prevented wars. Others had created lasting friendships between species that had been enemies for centuries. The chamber was quiet as aliens considered the proposal. Then Councillor Thexera of the Dominar Empire stood up. The Dominar looked like humans, but bigger and stronger. They had blue skin and believed they were better than everyone else. Once again, the upstart mammals think they know better than civilizations that ruled space before their planet had developed fire, Thexera said. His voice was full of contempt. "This proposal shows their simple thinking. Real solutions require strength, not clever words." Other Dominar delegates agreed loudly. The Helix Federation, who always followed the Dominar, joined in. Soon half the chamber was arguing against the human plan. "The humans do not understand true power," said Admiral, 4th of the Helix fleet. "They see only compromise where clear victory is needed." Dr. So-young leaned over to Hyunwoo. "The same thing as always," she whispered. "They will ignore our plan and make everything worse." She was right. The vote came quickly. The human proposal lost badly. Instead, the council voted to give the entire disputed system to the Dominar Empire. They would administer it as neutral peacekeepers. Hyunwoo almost laughed. Neutral peacekeepers. The Dominar would take everything valuable from both the Vrex and Talar. Then they would sell it back to them at high prices. In 5 years, both species would be poorer and angrier than before. The Vrex leader's mandibles clicked in rage. The Talar leader flashed angry red light. But the vote was final. The Dominar had won again. As the session ended, aliens began to leave. Many stopped to thank the human delegation for trying to help. The Vrex leader touched Hyunwoo's hand with one of his claws. Among his people, this meant deep respect. Your wisdom shines bright, the insect being said. We are sorry the others cannot see it. Back in their embassy quarters, the 4 humans sat around a table. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of air recyclers. Through the windows, they could see the lights of Nexus Prime stretching to the horizon. Millions of beings from hundreds of worlds lived and worked on this station. Show me the files, Hyunwoo said. Hye-jin activated her computer. Holographic displays filled the air around them. Each one showed a human proposal from the past 70 years. Trade agreements, peace treaties, environmental protection plans, scientific cooperation projects. 2,437 proposals, So Young read from the data. Acceptance rate, 12%. Now show me the results of the ones they rejected, Hyunwoo said. More displays appeared. War zones where human proposed peace plans might have worked. Trade routes that collapsed because aliens ignored human warnings. Colonies that died from diseases that human doctors could have prevented. Captain Jae-sung pointed to one display. The Kethmaran War. We proposed a solution in year 23. They ignored it. Fought for 8 years instead. 40 million dead. Then they used our exact proposal to make peace. The Great Famine of Sector 7, added Hye-jin. We warned them about the crop disease in year 31. They said human agriculture was too primitive to matter. 2 billion beings starved before they asked for our help. Hyunwoo stood up and walked to the window. Far below, ships from 100 worlds docked at the station's ports. Traders, diplomats, tourists, and refugees all mixed together in the great melting pot of galactic civilization. 17 wars prevented, he said quietly. 43 trade disputes solved. 212 successful peace negotiations. And for what? So they can call us upstart mammals. So Young joined him at the window. We have made their galaxy a better place, whether they admit it or not. But they will never admit it, Captain Jae-sung said. To them, we will always be the young species that got lucky. They will take our solutions and claim credit. They will ignore our warnings until disaster strikes. Then they will blame us for not doing more. Hyunwoo was quiet for a long time. Around him, his oldest friends waited. They had worked together for decades. They had seen humanity's best efforts dismissed, stolen, or twisted into something else. I have a question, Hyunwoo said finally. What would happen if we stopped? The room grew very quiet. Outside, the great station continued its eternal dance around the galaxy's political heart. Ships came and went. Aliens made deals and broke them. The galaxy turned, and problems grew like weeds. They would have to solve their own problems, So Young said. Or fail trying, added Captain Jae-sung. Ye-jin looked at the data displays still floating around them. Decades of human work. Decades of being ignored. Maybe it is time they learned the real cost of ignoring good advice. Hyunwoo turned from the window. His decision was made. Call for a vote. All diplomatic staff, all trade representatives, all military liaisons. I want everyone who represents humanity in galactic affairs. What are we voting on? So Young asked, though her eyes said she already knew. Whether to continue a job that no one wants us to do. 3 days later, Ambassador Hyunwoo stood at the center of the Galactic Council chamber. Every seat was filled. Word had spread that the humans were going to make an important announcement. Some aliens thought it would be about new trade deals. Others expected humans to offer help with the latest crisis in the Outer Rim. None of them expected what actually came. Hyunwoo wore his best diplomatic uniform. The dark blue fabric had small silver stars that represented Earth and her colonies. His hands were steady as he activated the speaking platform. The chamber's lights dimmed automatically, focusing attention on the human ambassador. Honored delegates of the Galactic Council, he began. His voice carried clearly through the translation systems. Every being in the chamber could understand him perfectly. For 70 years, humanity has served this galaxy with dedication. We have mediated your disputes. We have solved your problems. We have prevented your wars. Murmurs rippled through the audience. This sounded like the start of a request for more cooperation. Many aliens prepared to vote against whatever the humans wanted. In that time, we have submitted 2,137 proposals for the betterment of galactic civilization. Of these, you have accepted 293. The rest you have rejected, ignored, or claimed as your own ideas after they proved successful. The murmurs grew louder. Some aliens looked uncomfortable. They remembered specific instances where human proposals had been dismissed, only to be adopted later when problems grew worse. Councillor Thexera of the Dominar Empire stood up. Is there a point to this recitation of ancient history? His blue face showed annoyance. We are busy beings with important matters to discuss. Hyunwoo smiled. It was not a friendly smile. The point, Counselor, is that effective immediately. Humanity withdraws from all galactic institutions. The chamber exploded into noise. Hundreds of different species all began talking, clicking, flashing, or vibrating at once. The translation systems overloaded and shut down temporarily. For a few moments, the chamber filled with pure alien babel. When the translators came back online, Councillor Vexton of the Sinar Collective was standing. The Sinar looked like tall, thin humans, but with silver skin and large black eyes. They were famous for their logical thinking. Ambassador, please clarify this statement. What exactly do you mean by withdrawal? Hyunwoo activated a holographic display. It showed a list of human positions throughout the galaxy. The list was much longer than most aliens had realized. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. We withdraw from the Interspecies Mediation Corps. We withdraw from the Galactic Trade Arbitration Board. We withdraw from the Emergency Response Coordination Committee. We withdraw from all military cooperation agreements. With each announcement, sections of the holographic list turned red and disappeared. Furthermore, all human diplomatic personnel will return to Earth within 30 standard days. All human trade officials will close their offices. All human military advisors will report to their home commands. High Healer Niala of the Miran stood up. The Miran were gentle beings who resembled tall, thin trees with faces. They were respected throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and compassion. Ambassador Hyunwoo, surely this is a negotiating position. What do you want? Better trade terms? More representation in the council? Name your price, Hyunwoo shook his head. This is not a negotiation, honored healer. This is a goodbye. The silence that followed was deafening. Even species that usually made constant noise went completely quiet. The implications began to sink in. Councillor Vexton's silver face showed the first emotion most beings had ever seen from a Sinar. It looked like fear. Do you realize that humans currently manage or oversee 347 active interspecies disputes? You coordinate trade routes for 23 systems. You provide emergency response coordination for 67% of the galaxy. I am aware of our contributions, Hyunwoo replied calmly, which makes your consistent dismissal of our proposals all the more puzzling. Thexera of the Dominar tried to regain control. This is clearly an emotional outburst. Humans are known for their unstable feelings. We should ignore this tantrum and continue with important business. Dr. So-Young stepped forward. As humanity's chief cultural expert, she was known throughout the galaxy. Her words carried weight with species that respected scholarship. Councillor Thexera, you have just demonstrated exactly why we are leaving. For 70 years, whenever humans have disagreed with galactic decisions, you have called us emotional. When we have proposed solutions, you have called us naive. When we have prevented disasters, you have claimed the credit. She activated her own display. It showed a detailed analysis of galactic conflicts before and after human contact. Before humanity joined galactic civilization, this galaxy experienced an average of 23 major wars per century. In the 70 years of human involvement, you have experienced 3 minor conflicts. Trade disputes that previously took decades to resolve now take months. Emergency responses that killed millions now save most lives. Captain Jae-sung joined them on the platform. His military uniform was covered with medals from a dozen different species. Each one represented a successful peacekeeping mission. The Kelian Independence War lasted 6 months instead of 6 years because of human mediation. The Torth Vega Trade War ended in negotiation instead of orbital bombardment because humans showed both sides how to profit from cooperation. The Plague of Worlds was contained to 3 systems instead of 30 because human doctors coordinated the response. Heejin stepped forward last. As humanity's chief translator, She was the one who made communication possible between species that thought in completely different ways. We have spent 70 years learning your languages, your cultures, your ways of thinking. We have become experts in understanding what you need and what you fear. We have bridged gaps between species that never could have communicated without us. She gestured toward the assembled delegates. How many of you can speak directly to each other without human translation protocols? How many of your trade agreements work without human mediation? How many of your conflicts stay resolved without human monitoring? The chamber remained silent. The questions hit home because everyone knew the answers. Hyunwoo stepped forward again. For 7 decades, we have served this galaxy with dedication and wisdom. We have been treated as junior partners in our own solutions. We have watched our proposals dismissed and our warnings ignored, only to see you implement our exact recommendations when crisis forced your hand. He paused and looked around the chamber. His gaze touched on delegates from dozens of species.
Many could not meet his eyes. We return to you the problems you have refused to let us solve properly.
May you find the wisdom we apparently lack. With that, the human delegation turned and walked out. Their footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. No one tried to stop them. No one called for them to return. The shock was too great. As the chamber doors closed behind the humans, the real chaos began. Admiral Kethvar of the Vrex Collective started clicking rapidly. His words came out as angry buzzes. The crystal beings will restart their illegal mining immediately. Without human mediation, we have no way to stop them peacefully. The Talar delegate, Shard Singer Qualthy, flashed bright red light. The Insect Collective will expand beyond all borders. Human monitors were the only thing preventing their aggressive growth. Trade Director Velshan of the Merchant Coalition stood on her floating platform. She looked like a cross between a squid and a dolphin, with tentacles that allowed her to manipulate multiple controls at once. "Do you idiots realize what you have done?" she demanded. "Human trade coordinators manage the shipping schedules for half the galaxy. Without them, cargo ships will collide in hyperspace. Stations will be overloaded while others starve." More aliens began to understand the scope of the problem. The Aquan delegate, who breathed water and spoke through sonar clicks, raised an alarm about the Deep Space Research Station. Human engineers maintained the environmental systems that allowed 12 different species to work together safely. The Zephyrian representative, a being of pure energy contained in a special field suit, flickered with agitation. The mining operations in the Corona Nebula depend on human safety protocols. No other species understands how to work safely near stellar phenomena. Counselor Vexton tried to bring order to the chaos. "We must form emergency committees immediately. We need to identify critical human positions and find replacements." "Replacements?" laughed Trade Director Velshan bitterly. "Do you have any idea how complex human trade algorithms are? They factor in cultural preferences, seasonal variations, political tensions, and economic cycles for hundreds of worlds simultaneously. It took them 50 years to develop those systems." High Healer Niala's voice cut through the noise like a gentle breeze through a storm. "Perhaps we should consider why they left. What drove them to this decision?" Texara stood up angrily. "Emotions. Human weakness. They could not handle proper criticism of their primitive ideas. Their primitive ideas," Vexton said quietly, "prevented the Korth-Delian War that would have killed billions. Their primitive ideas created the trade network that keeps your empire fed. Their primitive ideas coordinate the emergency responses that save lives across the galaxy." The first problems started small. On Trade Station Harmony Point, the morning shift began like any other day. Merchant ships from dozens of worlds waited in orderly lines to dock. The station's traffic control system had worked perfectly for 20 years, but station manager Do Hyun was gone. He had left 3 days ago with the other human staff. The Zephyrian and Quan merchants who arrived that morning found no one to assign docking priorities. The Zephyrians, beings of pure energy, valued speed above all else. They demanded immediate docking rights. The Quan, who looked like giant crabs with multiple arms, believed in strict first-come, first-served order. Without Do Hyun to mediate, both sides prepared to enforce their own rules. By noon, the first energy weapons had been fired. By evening, 3 ships were damaged and Harmony Point was closed to all traffic. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The Vrex-Talar dispute, which humans had tried to solve just days before, exploded into actual violence. Without mediators who understood both species' psychology, every meeting ended in threats. The Vrex saw the Talar as cold, unfeeling creatures who cared nothing for life. The tailor saw the Vrex as chaotic swarms who could not think logically. Neither side was completely wrong, but neither was completely right either. The humans had understood this. They had found ways to bridge the gap between emotion and logic. Now there was no bridge. Vrex colony ships moved toward disputed systems. Tailor mining platforms activated their defense shields. Within a week, the first shots were fired between ships that had been cooperating peacefully for decades. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council tried to respond to the growing crisis. Emergency committees worked around the clock. The smartest beings from dozens of species offered solutions. None of them worked. The Sinar created logical mediation algorithms. They programmed computers to analyze disputes and suggest fair solutions. The computers worked perfectly when dealing with trade disagreements or resource allocation. But when the emotional Vrex faced the logical Talar, the algorithms failed completely. The computers recommended splitting everything equally. The Vrex needed sacred breeding grounds that could not be divided. The Talar needed specific mineral deposits that existed in only one location. Equal division satisfied no one and solved nothing. Counselor Vexton stared at the failed algorithms with growing despair. The humans never used computers for this, he told his research team. They talked to both sides. They understood feelings as well as facts. Feelings are inefficient, replied his assistant, Dr. Kilnix. Emotions cause errors in judgment. Yes, Vexton said quietly, but apparently they also cause solutions that logic cannot find. The Vrex tried their own approach. They offered to absorb other species into their collective consciousness. Through the hive mind, all beings could share thoughts and feelings. Conflicts would be impossible because everyone would understand each other perfectly. The suggestion terrified most of the galaxy. Individual species saw the Vrex offer as an attempt to destroy their unique cultures. The very idea of losing their separate identities sent panic through dozens of worlds. 3 more species withdrew from the Galactic Council, rather than risk forced assimilation. The Helix Federation threatened war if the Vrex tried to expand their collective. The crisis grew worse instead of better. The Dominar, led by Admiral Zethkor, proposed military solutions. Strong leadership would end conflicts quickly. Disputed systems would be placed under Dominar control until better solutions could be found. This suggestion nearly triggered a galaxy-wide war. Free species saw it as an obvious attempt at conquest. The Merchant Coalition threatened to cut all trade with Dominar worlds. Even traditional Dominar allies began to question their loyalty. We are not conquerors, Admiral Zethkor insisted. We offer order to replace chaos. Your order looks remarkably like slavery, replied High Healer Niala of the Miran. Her gentle words carried more sting than any angry shout. As conflicts multiplied, the galactic trade network began to collapse. The network was far more complex than most beings had realized. Human trade coordinators had spent decades optimizing shipping routes. They knew which species preferred certain types of cargo holds. They understood seasonal variations in different systems. They could predict political tensions that might affect trade. Without them, cargo ships began arriving at the wrong stations. Aquan vessels designed for water-breathing crews tried to dock at stations built for air breathers. The environmental systems overloaded trying to accommodate incompatible life forms. Zephyrian energy ships interfered with Quan communication systems. Taylor crystal vessels created light patterns that triggered panic responses in Vrex insect crews. Problems that human coordinators had solved automatically now created major disasters. Trade Director Velshan watched her empire crumble from her office on Central Trade Station. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Cargo shipments were delayed. Stations were overloaded. Some systems faced shortages while others dealt with massive oversupply. "Get me the human trade algorithms," she ordered her staff. "We have them," replied her assistant, a nervous Aquan named Driftsinger. "But we cannot understand them. They are written in human mathematics that factors in emotional responses and cultural preferences. Our computers cannot process illogical variables." Velshan tentacles writhed in frustration. Illogical variables that somehow made the entire network function perfectly. The worst crisis began on Kelvin III. A plague outbreak started in the main city. In the past, human doctors would have coordinated the response automatically. They understood how different species reacted to diseases. They knew which treatments worked for which aliens. They could organize complex medical operations that saved millions of lives. Dr. So-Young had been the galaxy's leading expert on cross-species medicine. She had developed protocols that allowed Vrek's immune systems to fight diseases that normally only affected Taylor crystal matrices. Her work had prevented dozens of major epidemics. Now she was gone, and no one else understood her methods. The Kelvin plague spread to 4 systems before anyone realized how serious it was. Each species tried to help in their own way. Aquan doctors offered water-based treatments that poisoned air-breathing patients. Zephyrian energy healers used techniques that overloaded biological nervous systems. Taylor crystal physicians applied logical diagnostic methods that completely missed emotional and psychological factors. The death toll climbed toward millions. High healer, Nyala tried to coordinate a unified response. Her Moran medical knowledge was vast, but she had never worked with so many different species at once. Human protocols had made such cooperation possible. Without them, even well-meaning doctors caused more harm than good. "We are fighting the same enemy but using weapons that hurt each other," she reported to the Emergency Medical Council. "We need someone who understands all our differences." On Earth, Dr. So-Young monitored the galactic news feeds with growing horror. She watched the plague spread through systems she could have saved. In her desk drawer, she kept emergency response plans for exactly this type of crisis. Plans that would coordinate treatment between species. Plans that would save millions of lives, plans that no one had asked for. Captain Jae-sung faced a similar situation from Luna Base. Military conflicts erupted across the galaxy as disputes that humans had kept under control exploded into violence. His peacekeeping experience could prevent most of these wars before they really started, but Earth's Colonial Council had voted. Humanity would not interfere unless formally requested to return. No such request had come from the Galactic Council. "Admiral," reported his intelligence officer, Lieutenant Kyung-ho, "the Outer Rim situation is deteriorating rapidly. 7 systems are now involved in active combat. Civilian casualties are mounting." Jae-sung studied the tactical displays. The solution was obvious to any experienced peacekeeper. Deploy monitoring stations between the hostile fleets. Establish communication protocols that let both sides talk without losing face. Offer face-saving compromises that address the real issues beneath the political positions. "Could we stop it?" he asked. "Easily, sir. 2 weeks of proper mediation would end the fighting. The root causes are economic, not territorial. Both sides want the same things but don't know how to say so." Jae-sung turned away from the displays. "Note our assessment in the official log. Flag it for immediate transmission if Earth receives a formal request for assistance." On Nexus Prime, the situation grew more desperate by the day. Counselor Vexton tried to hold emergency sessions, but species that had cooperated for decades could no longer communicate effectively. Without human translation protocols, fundamental misunderstandings multiplied. The Vreks thought in collective terms. When they said, "We want this," they meant their entire species shared that desire. The Talar thought individually. When they said, "We want this," they meant their delegation had voted for a specific position. The difference seemed small, but it led to completely different expectations about agreements and commitments. Human translators had automatically adjusted for such differences. Heejin could take a Vrek's collective statement and phrase it in individual terms that Talar delegates could understand. She could take Talar logical arguments and present them in emotional contexts that resonated with Vrek's sensibilities. 1 month after the humans left, the Outer Rim exploded into war. The Krex Empire and Talnari Federation had been arguing over mining rights in the Vega system for 20 years. Human mediators had kept their disputes contained to angry words and legal challenges. Now those mediators were gone. Admiral Crixmore of the Krex fleet was tired of waiting. His people needed the rare metals found in Vega's asteroid belt. Without those resources, Krex technology would fall behind their competitors. The Talnari had blocked mining operations for 2 decades with endless legal delays. "Enough talk," he told his war council. "We take what is ours by right of need." The Krex Empire was built for war. Their ships were fast and heavily armed. Their soldiers were trained from birth to fight without fear. In human-mediated negotiations, these advantages had been balanced by Talnari legal expertise and trading skills. Without humans to enforce agreements, strength became the only currency that mattered. The first Krex attack caught the Talnari completely by surprise. 3 mining stations were destroyed before their automated distress signals even transmitted. The Talnari response was swift and deadly. Their ships were fewer but more advanced. Their weapons could strike across entire star systems. Within days, 14 systems were drawn into the conflict. Old alliances activated as species chose sides. The Helix Federation supported the Kreks, believing in their right to expand. The Merchant Coalition backed the Talnari, fearing that aggressive expansion would disrupt trade throughout the galaxy. On Nexus Prime, Counselor Vexton watched the war reports with growing horror. His logical Sinar mind could see exactly where this was heading. Computer models showed the conflict spreading to at least 40 systems within 6 months. The economic damage would take decades to repair. Can we not mediate between them? Asked Dr. Kilnex, his research assistant. With what authority? Vexton replied bitterly. The Galactic Council has no enforcement power. Human peacekeepers provided our only real influence. Military commanders respected them because they understood both war and peace. The truth was painful to admit. The Galactic Council was really just a debating society. For 70 years, human mediators had given it real power by making their agreements work. Species followed human-crafted treaties because the treaties actually solved problems. Now the Council had no way to make anyone do anything. Admiral Zethkor tried to study human peacekeeping manuals. His staff had recovered thousands of documents from abandoned human military bases. The strategic concepts were easy to understand. Deploy forces to separate enemies. Control key systems to limit conflict. Use superior firepower to enforce ceasefires. But the manuals also contained sections that made no sense to Dominar thinking. Cultural analysis for combat zones described how different species reacted to military pressure. Psychological factors in surrender explained why some enemies would fight to the death, while others would quit easily. These humans fought with their minds as much as their weapons, he told his staff. They understood their enemies better than we understand our friends. The war in the Outer Rim spread faster than anyone had predicted. Traditional alliances meant that attacking one species automatically meant fighting their allies. The Kreks' assault on Talnari mining stations triggered mutual defense pacts. Soon, fleets from dozens of worlds were racing toward the combat zone. More importantly, the war disrupted the already fragile trade network. Shipping routes that passed through contested systems were abandoned. Cargo vessels refused to risk capture or destruction. Critical supplies stopped flowing to worlds that depended on interstellar trade. Trade Director Velshan watched her network collapse from Central Trade Station. The reports flooding in painted a picture of complete systemic failure. Her tentacles writhed in frustration as she tried to find solutions. Reroute the medical supplies around the combat zone, she ordered. Impossible, replied her assistant. The alternate routes pass through Vrex space. They are fighting with the Talar over territorial expansion. No commercial traffic allowed. Then send them through Aquan systems. The Aquan refused to handle cargo from the Zephyrian sectors. Some kind of cultural conflict that started last week. Without human cultural liaisons, we cannot even understand what they are arguing about. Velshan slammed one tentacle against her desk. The sound echoed through her office like a gunshot. 3 months ago, we could move cargo anywhere in the galaxy within standard protocols. Now we cannot ship medical supplies 50 light-years without triggering a diplomatic incident. The problems multiplied exponentially. Species that had worked together for decades found themselves unable to cooperate without human facilitators. Cultural misunderstandings that humans had automatically prevented now created permanent enemies. The worst example was the Aquan-Zephyrian conflict. It started with a simple communication error. Zephyrian energy beings communicated through electromagnetic pulses. Aquan sonar speakers used sound waves in water. Human translation systems had bridged this gap seamlessly for years. Without those systems, a routine cargo transfer became a disaster. Zephyrian greeting pulses interfered with Aquan navigation sonar. The Aquan ship crashed into the space station's docking bay. 7 Aquan crew members died. The Zephyrians tried to apologize, but their energy-based language had no concept of accidental death. To them, all actions were intentional because energy beings made conscious choices about every pulse. Their apology came across as an admission of deliberate murder. The Aquan response was swift and final. All Zephyrian vessels were banned from Aquan space. Trade agreements were canceled. Diplomatic relations were severed. 2 species that had been close allies became permanent enemies in the space of one conversation. Similar disasters played out across the galaxy. The Miran healers accidentally poisoned Quan patients with treatments that worked perfectly on other species. The Talar crystal beings created light patterns that triggered panic responses in insect-like Vrex. The Vrex collective consciousness terrified individual-minded species who saw it as attempted mental invasion. Every mistake created new enemies. Every misunderstanding started new conflicts. The galaxy that humans had carefully held together began to tear itself apart. Dr. So Young monitored the chaos from her office on Earth. Medical emergencies that she could have solved in minutes now killed millions. The Kelvin plague had spread to 7 systems because different species could not coordinate treatment. Each world tried to help in their own way, but their methods conflicted with each other. The Vrex are trying to treat crystal matrix diseases with biological immune responses, she told Captain Jae Sung during their daily briefing. The Talar are using logical diagnostic algorithms on patients who need emotional support. The Aquan are prescribing water-based treatments for species that breathe methane. Jae Sung studied the tactical reports from the Outer Rim War. 14 star systems burning because no one understood how to make peace between enemies who were really fighting about economics, not territory. We could stop this in 2 weeks, he said quietly. Deploy 3 peacekeeping fleets to key positions. Establish neutral zones for negotiation. Address the real issues instead of the political posturing. But we will not, So Young replied, because they never asked us to come back. The irony was bitter. Earth had become the most peaceful and prosperous world in known space. Without galactic obligations, humanity had focused on internal development. New colonies flourished. Scientific research advanced rapidly. Art and culture bloomed without the constant stress of managing alien conflicts. Meanwhile, the galaxy burned. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council faced its greatest crisis in recorded history. The station itself was beginning to fail. The environmental systems had been designed by 12 different species, each with their own ideas about proper atmosphere and gravity. Human engineers had spent decades creating automated systems that balanced all these requirements. Without human maintenance, the systems began to conflict with each other. Aquan humidity controls fought against Zephyrian energy fields. Vrex atmospheric processors produced chemicals that were toxic to Talar crystal matrices. Temperature regulators designed for different species created zones that were lethal to other inhabitants. Emergency repair teams worked around the clock, but they could not understand the human integration protocols. The documentation existed, but it was written in human mathematics that factored in cultural preferences and biological needs simultaneously. No other species thought in such complex, interconnected ways. Counselor Vexton stood in the main council chamber, watching technicians try to repair the air recycling systems. The chamber's atmosphere was becoming unbreathable for half the species present. Emergency breathing apparatus was being distributed, but it was a temporary solution at best. How long before complete system failure? He asked the chief engineer. Without human maintenance protocols, perhaps 30 days, came the reply. The systems are incredibly complex. Each repair we make causes problems somewhere else. Vexton looked around the chamber. 50 million beings lived and worked on Nexus Prime. Representatives from hundreds of worlds called it home. If the station failed, it would be the greatest disaster in galactic history. More importantly, it would be the most ironic. The alarms on Nexus Prime grew louder as the station's life support systems fought against each other. In the main council chamber, representatives from dozens of species struggled to breathe the thinning air. Emergency breathing masks were distributed, but they were designed for short-term use only. Counselor Thexera of the Dominar Empire found himself working next to Dr. Killnex of the Sanar Collective. Just weeks ago, he would have scorned the silver-skinned aliens' logical approach to problems. Now they worked together desperately, trying to decode human environmental protocols. The atmospheric processors are following 12 different instruction sets, Killnex reported. His logical mind could understand the technical specifications, but the human integration software made no sense. They use emotional variables and cultural preferences in mathematical equations. Our computers cannot process such illogical factors. Thexera wiped sweat from his blue forehead. The temperature controls were malfunctioning, making some areas too hot while others froze. Illogical factors that somehow made everything work perfectly for decades, he admitted bitterly. Around them, beings who had never spoken to each other were forced to cooperate or die together. Aquan technicians worked with Zephyrian energy specialists. Vrex engineers collaborated with Talar crystal experts. Fear of death overcame centuries of cultural prejudice. But cooperation was not enough. They were smart enough to understand what the human systems were supposed to do. They were not wise enough to understand how to make them work together. High Healer Niala stood in the center of the chaos, her tree-like form swaying as gravity fluctuated unpredictably. She had seen enough death in the past months to last several lifetimes. The plague that had spread through 7 systems. The wars in the Outer Rim. Now this potential disaster that could kill 50 million beings in hours. "We must contact Earth," she announced. Her gentle voice somehow carried over the noise of failing machinery and desperate voices. "Formal request. Full diplomatic protocol. We ask the humans to return." "On what terms?" demanded Admiral Zethkor. Even in crisis, the Dominar military leader thought like a negotiator. "They will not accept junior status again, not after what we have put them through." Counselor Vexton looked up from a control panel he was trying to repair. His logical Sinar mind had been processing the implications of human return for weeks. "They will demand equality, full voting rights, veto power over council decisions, autonomous authority in their areas of expertise." "Give it to them," said Trade Director Velshan. Her tentacles moved frantically over multiple communication devices trying to coordinate rescue efforts across the galaxy. "Give them anything they want. The alternative is the complete collapse of galactic civilization." But even as the emergency delegation prepared to leave for Earth, another crisis demanded immediate attention. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Outer Rim War had spread to 23 systems. The trade network had collapsed entirely. Medical emergencies killed millions who could have been saved with proper coordination. Most importantly, copycat situations were developing on dozens of stations and worlds. Complex systems designed by multiple species were failing without human integration protocols. The galaxy had become dependent on human expertise in ways that no one had fully understood. Dr. So-Young received the first unofficial communication from Nexus Prime while she was reviewing medical reports in her Earth office. The message was simple and desperate. "Environmental failure imminent. 50 million lives at risk. Please advise." She stared at the communication for several minutes. Her desk drawers contained detailed repair protocols for exactly this type of emergency. She could solve the problem in minutes with a few technical instructions. But Earth's position was clear. No assistance without formal diplomatic request. Captain Jae Sung found her 20 minutes later, staring out the window at Earth's restored forests. The planet had flourished during humanity's isolation. Cities were clean and green. The sky was blue and clear. Peace and prosperity reigned while the galaxy burned. "The news feeds are reporting massive system failures," he said quietly. "Nexus Prime has maybe 6 hours before complete environmental collapse." "I know," So-Young replied. "I have the solution right here." She gestured to her computer terminal. 3 emergency procedures that would stabilize their systems immediately. "But we cannot send them unless officially asked." "No," she agreed. "We cannot." They stood in silence watching Earth's peaceful sunset. Both of them had spent decades serving the galaxy's needs. Now they were forced to watch millions die because of political pride. "Do you think they will ask?" Jae-Sung wondered. "Eventually," So-Young said. "The question is whether they will ask in time." On Nexus Prime, the formal delegation was being assembled with desperate speed. Counselor Vexton would lead the mission as the most logical voice. High Healer Niala would provide moral authority. Admiral Zethkor would represent military interests. Trade Director Velshan would speak for economic concerns. Most importantly, they brought with them something that had never been offered before: complete authority to negotiate on behalf of the entire Galactic Council. Whatever terms the humans demanded, they were authorized to accept. "We may not have enough time," warned the station's chief engineer. "Environmental collapse is accelerating. The competing systems are fighting each other more aggressively as power levels drop." Vexton nodded grimly. "Then we must hope the humans are more forgiving than we deserve." The delegation's ship launched from Nexus Prime as emergency systems activated throughout the station. Citizens were moved to temporary shelters with independent life support. Non-essential personnel were evacuated. The great center of galactic civilization prepared for possible death. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, smaller crises multiplied. The Vrextaler War had drawn in 8 more species. The trade collapse created famines on dozens of worlds. Medical emergencies killed beings who could have been saved with proper coordination. Each crisis had human solutions. Human peacekeepers could end the wars. Human trade coordinators could restart the shipping networks. Human doctors could coordinate medical responses between species. But the humans stayed on Earth, waiting for an invitation that might come too late. The delegation reached Earth's solar system as Nexus Prime's oxygen levels dropped to critical minimums. Their ship was intercepted by Earth Defense Force vessels, clean, efficient craft that showed how much human technology had advanced during their isolation. Galactic delegation requests immediate audience with Earth government. Vexton transmitted. Emergency status. 50 million lives at risk. The response came quickly, but formally. Delegation is cleared for landing at United Earth Diplomatic Center. Ambassador Hyunwoo will meet you in Conference Room 1. Conference Room 1 was simple and elegant. Earth's restored environment was visible through large windows. The contrast with Nexus Prime's mechanical complexity was striking. Here, natural and artificial systems worked together harmoniously. Ambassador Hyunwoo entered with Dr. So-young, Captain Jae-sung, and Hyejin, the same 4 humans who had walked out of the Galactic Council months ago. They looked healthy and peaceful. Earth's isolation had been good for them. Honored delegates, Hyunwoo began formally. How may Earth assist you? The alien delegation exchanged glances. They had prepared speeches about mutual cooperation and shared interests. But with millions of lives hanging in the balance, diplomatic niceties seemed pointless. We need your help, Vexton said simply. The galaxy is dying without you. Dr. So-young leaned forward. Define dying. Trade Director Velshan activated a holographic display. It showed the current state of galactic civilization in painful detail. Red zones marked active wars. Orange areas showed trade disruptions. Purple indicated medical emergencies. Most of the galaxy glowed with warning colors. 23 systems at war, she reported. Complete trade network collapse. 7 major plague zones. Environmental failures on 43 stations and worlds. Estimated death toll in the billions if current trends continue. High Healer Niala's tree-like form swayed with emotion. We were wrong, she said simply. About everything. We treated you as junior partners when you were actually the foundation that held everything together. Captain Jae-sung studied the tactical displays. His military mind could see exactly how to solve most of the conflicts, but he also saw something else. The scope of galactic dependence on human expertise. You do not just need our help, he said quietly. You need us to rebuild galactic civilization from the ground up. Admiral Zethkor nodded reluctantly. Our analysis shows the same conclusion. Without human integration protocols, most of our cooperative systems are unsustainable. We need more than assistance. We need partnership. Partnership implies equality, Hyunwoo observed. For 70 years, our partnership was unequal. You took our solutions but rejected our authority. You claimed credit for our successes but blamed us for any failures. The room fell silent. The alien delegates had no defense against the accusation because it was completely true. Dr. So-young pulled out a datapad and activated it. The screen showed a detailed analysis of galactic civilization before and after human contact. Before humanity joined galactic civilization, your average century included 23 major wars.